Hello and welcome to the Game Day Podcast from talkSPORT with me, Sam Matterface, talkSPORT's chief football correspondent, Alex Crook, and the former Benfica, Chelsea, West Ham and Charlton left-back, FA Cup winner extraordinaire, Scott Minto. So Manchester City hold one hand on the side of the Premier League trophy now. Can anyone rip it from their grasp? Well, not Arsenal, because they're going underground after a home defeat to Brighton ended their title charge. At the bottom of the table, Southampton have finally been relegated to the Championship. They're the first casualty from the Premier League this season. Who is going to join them? We'll debate that. And after quite little weeks about the managerial situation at Chelsea, as we told you on this podcast, Mauricio Pochettino will be sitting behind the manager's desk at Stamford Bridge. It's all on the Game Day Podcast from talkSPORT. And a very good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world, to the Game Day Podcast. Scott Minto, hello. Alex Crook, hello. I'm in a hotel room in West London, and Alex Crook isn't here, which is great news for me and for the cleaning staff, because they won't have to mop up the remnants of any late night food that he has devoured in a bed. It's not it was scandalous that you left it in the bed. Yeah, correct. Who eats a kebab in a bed?
Harsh but true.
I'd just like to take the floor for a second, if I can. I don't know if our friends back at base, Jeremy and Joe, have got the ability to put in some sad music here. But personally, I'd like to give Arsenal an end-of-term report. Without doubt, the most improved in class. You won't hear anyone on this podcast suggest for 1 minute that they bottled the title race. Arsenal have got 81 points, already the most that they have got in a season for 15 years. Only once have they had more points at this stage of a Premier League season, and that was in the 2003-2004 title-winning season, the Invincibles year. But to the supporters, yesterday, guys, not cool. Not cool. What you did last night was out of order, leaving before the end. Now, it may be that the public transport in this country is not particularly great, and I would concur with you that that is the case. Now, it may be that many of you have got to get up this morning and you know, you had stuff to do. Okay, fine. But for the majority, that's not cool. It's not cool. After what Arteta and his team have done this season, it was going to end, if it was going to end like it did, in a thrashing at home. At least inject some gallows humour, ironic chanting, then maybe a little bit of support for the team that has transformed before your eyes. Compare this to last season, when this was a team that slipped out of the top four away at Newcastle. Couldn't even get into the Champions League places. And you chased the title until the last 3 games of the season. That's a massive, massive improvement. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it really hurts. We understand that. But come on. Mikel Arteta hasn't made every decision right, and you made a big one wrong. You walked out, and you should be better than that. What do you think, boys?
I see where you're coming from. I do see where you're coming from, but it's a heck of a way to officially lose the title, going down 3-0 at home, where, in fairness, you've been pretty imperious for much of the season. I won't use the word bottlers, you're right, because it has been a fabulous campaign for Arsenal. I don't think any of us had them even in the top 4, let alone the top 2 at the start of the season. But I think it is possible to be a bit of both. It's possible to have overachieved, undoubtedly they have, but it's also possible to have lost a little bit of nerve when the biggest prize is at your fingertips. Because, okay, they lost at Manchester City. A lot of teams do that. Drawing 3-3 at home to Southampton, who have just clocked a club record for the most defeats in the league season, takes some doing. 2-0 up at West Ham, not winning that game, takes some doing. Even 2-0 up at Liverpool and not managing to see it out, I think was a hammer blow. So I do think nerves and pressure have caught up on them, but I also think they've overachieved, and I think the fans should have stuck it out and given them the appreciation they deserved.
Yeah, that was a lot of waffles against the fact that you thought the fans should have stayed. But thanks for taking up all the time. Scott, what do you think of the fans? I mean, you don't have to give us a whole resume and the results list from the season. Just tell us what you thought about the fans leaving early.
Okay, I'll try and edit it down now. I mean, but I do agree with a lot of what Crookie said there, a lot. No, you're spot on. But I think it's almost a bit sort of just resignation. And Arsenal haven't been here in this position for a very long time. I think you always want your fans to stay towards the end, and what the players and the manager have given the fans, and there seems to be a real unity now, is there's something special. It has been a special season despite them not winning, incredibly disappointing. So yeah, no, look, I'm with you on the walking out. Just when the players have given you everything, almost everything, towards the end of the season, and there's only been these 2 teams that are left in the title race, you leave before the end. And Look, we can talk about the game in a sec, but they were absolutely outclassed from the first minute to the last. Maybe there was a 5-minute spell just before half-time. I think the Arsenal fans knew what was coming in terms of the title race. I think they're disappointed. But, I didn't realise you were going to start with this, Sam, but I think it's a very good point, actually, because I think the fans should have had some kind of gallows humour really, and turned it around, because it has been a very, very good season.
We'll get stuck into the game in just a second, but maybe it's a sort of cultural thing at Arsenal. Just get out before the end. Manchester City inches away from reclaiming their Premier League title after that 3-0 defeat at home for Arsenal by brilliant Brighton. Well, Roberto De Zerbi promised that we would see the very best version of Brighton in the game after what was an Everton debacle, and he wasn't lying. I mean, this was a terrific performance, I thought, by Brighton. Full of swagger, brilliant wing play. Matoma was terrific. He started on one side, ended up on the other. He ripped Ben White a new one on a couple of occasions. He was absolutely superb in the game. Estupiñán gets his first goal. He deserved it because over the course of the season, he's been terrific as well. And he had one illegally chalked off against Crystal Palace earlier in the campaign. But where do we stand on the knee sliding down the touchline after the third goal from Roberto De Zerbi? Are we having that or what?
I don't mind it. And
of course you don't.
It'll be hypocritical because there'll be Arsenal fans saying if that was Arteta, you'd be going mad, asking for an FA ban. But it was a brilliant performance, probably the best performance of his tenure, and maybe even the best performance since Brighton came into the Premier League. And to do that after being thrashed 5-1 at home by Everton, I think tells you all you need to know about De Zerbi and the character of this Brighton team. So, yeah, I was all in favour.
Yeah, Scott, would you having that down the touchline? I mean, if it had been Mikel Arteta or it had been Jose Mourinho, everyone would be writing headlines saying it was disrespectful. But, because it's Roberto De Zerbi and he's the flavour of the month right now, everyone goes, oh, this is brilliant.
I'll be honest with you. On the one hand, and now I'm out the game sort of looking at it and as a fan and a spectator, he's colourful, isn't he? He adds character.
There's no doubt about that, yeah.
From a purely football point of view, I'm not having it. You're 3-0 up. You've been great. Okay, well done. Have a little bit of. I've got to choose the word carefully because I don't want to say he's not, but you almost just want to have a bit more class and sort of say, yeah, that was fantastic. We did really well. We were superb. I mean, Crookie's right. It's arguably their best performance in the Premier League, let alone this season. And then can you argue that's one of Brighton's best? How far do you want to go back? Considering where they are and they're in the top flight, one of their best performances ever in the history of Brighton. Let's get really dramatic about it. But what I would say is that was as good a performance against Arsenal as City's recently was against Arsenal. And City were absolutely superb.
Yeah, and also it's becoming a bit of a habit for Brighton to go to the Emirates and win games. I think they've picked up, 4 wins in 5 trips to the Emirates now, which is particularly impressive, really, bearing in mind Arsenal's rise during that period under Arteta. He seems to have Arteta's number, Roberto De Zerbi. He did admit after the game that he thinks that Moises Caicedo and Alexis McAllister will end up leaving this summer. But do you understand that they will manage that sort of departure and that they won't break up the entire squad, Crook? It will be a slow sort of churn of talent rather than a massive exodus.
Yeah, I would expect Matoma to actually sign a new contract because I think he'll be another player that's in demand. And even Estupiñán, who's not been there very long, but he already looks a better player than Marc Cucurella. But they're planning for this, as you say. I think it's the first time publicly that De Zerbi has really come out and said he expects those two to leave. But they've already signed João Pedro to bolster their attack. They've got James Milner pretty much signed up as well. And they're looking to Borussia Dortmund and their midfielder, Mahmoud Dahoud, to come in and maybe compensate for Caicedo's departure. So we know from Brighton they have this incredible ability to regenerate. I guess the question is, how long can they keep doing that? But they're going to get decent money for those two. You're probably talking £150 million combined.
Yeah, and I thought yesterday in particular, Caicedo was terrific. There was a couple of naughty challenges in this game as well. It was quite spicy, wasn't it? I was surprised to look back and see that it was only 3 on-field yellow cards. There was a yellow card for Mikel Arteta as well, but it was quite a sort of spicy affair. Andy Malley could have brought out the yellow card on a couple more occasions, maybe more than that. There was a nasty challenge early on Matoma, I thought, from Martinelli, which looked like it was a 50-50 with the naked eye, but when you watch the replay, it wasn't very nice at all. Scott?
I'm 100% with you, Sam. I thought, if anything, that's a red. You know, he's not looked at him. He's used his shoulder and arm to go into him. He's caught him in the face. You could argue it's a winger's tackle trying to protect himself. You could also argue it's a cowardly tackle. I thought it was really poor, and Mitoma did really well to get back off the floor. Caicedo, as Roy Keane was saying, you know, you did it to my mate, I'm going to do this to you. So
Finish the game for him.
have a bit of that. And I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I don't think it was malicious for Martinelli, but I think if you look at it and you watch it and it looks even worse in replays and slow motions, I think it's a red card.
Yeah, it probably was malicious from Caicedo, though, especially seeing as he walked away from the challenge and slapped hands, high-five style, with Mitoma, as if to say, don't worry, I've got your back, fella. It's okay. Arsenal have won just 2 of the last 7 games. Saka has had a dip in form. He looks exhausted at the back end of the season. Will Mikel Arteta have to take a little bit of responsibility here, Crook, for not rotating Saka more often? Let's be honest, he played 8 Europa League games. Was that entirely necessary?
No, it wasn't, especially when a lot of Arsenal fans were saying after they lost to Sporting that it was a blessing in disguise. So, yeah, I think there's a little bit of naivety. It also highlights a lack of squad depth. But I think if you're looking for the big factor in Arsenal's demise, Arsenal falling away, you can't really look too much further than that injury to William Saliba, which was also in that Europa League game against Sporting. So that Europa League campaign was quite costly in more ways than one because they just haven't looked the same defensive unit without him.
They need strengthening in terms of depth, don't they? That's going to be the big job now for Edu, for Mikel Arteta over the course of the summer.
Yeah, no, they do. I mean, I think there's one player, and he's not like an absolute standout player has been injured, and everyone's kind of fallen a bit like a pack of cards. And I think I felt a bit sorry for Rob Holding. I thought he was scapegoated a bit of it. Look, he's not in the same class as Saliba, and he probably shouldn't be in a starting 11 of a team chasing a Premier League title. But please, everyone else, stand up. I mean, Gabriel, what's happened to you since? Why do we need to be saying, oh, he's not quite the same without Saliba? Well, you be the senior centre-back, you know, and then Thomas Partey as well. Martin Odegaard, his stats are great over the season, but I think in the business end of the season, he wasn't quite there. Saka was tired, Martinelli a little bit too. So, look, I think the reason why I stuck with City all the way is because mentally they've been there. And you're right to say about, you know, Saliba was a blow. Arsenal needed every single player fit for every single minute of every single match in their top form to try and get past this Manchester City side, who I would go as far as to say is probably the best side. I don't mean necessarily in this particular season, but over a period of 5 or 6 years, the best side we've ever seen in English football. You know,
and a recency bias. I think you're starting a fight there with Alex Crook and the Manchester United fans.
Let's go at some point on another podcast on that.
Let's not do it now. We've got a whole summer to fill, and we definitely need to use subjects like this to fill it. So let's you know, you put your gloves away, boys. Stand in opposite corners. You can get it on later in the summer, and it will all end in a bed with a kebab. Everton 0, Manchester City 3. Only 4 changes for Pep. I think I was a bit surprised by that. I thought that Haaland would be rested, but then I remembered that he was trying to go for Dixie Dean's record, and he's made another step towards that.
Also, Man City have only used 23 players in the Premier League this season, which I think
they've only got 24
of the 20 Premier League teams. So I think it shows actually that maybe in some ways, and we all thought it could be a negative when Arsenal were well clear at the top, getting rid of the likes of Jesus and Zinchenko and having this smaller pool to choose from maybe has worked to their advantage because you sort of know what the lineup is going to be. Obviously, you changed the 3 in behind Haaland, but apart from that, it was a pretty consistent side.
Yeah, we did say a couple of weeks ago, though, when we were going into the Champions League sort of running, that we thought it was a good thing for Pep Guardiola. We said it ahead of the Bayern Munich game. I remember saying, you know, a few years ago, we were always worrying about what he was going to do when it came to the big match, what pieces he was going to change, what inventive new formation he was going to come up with. But ultimately, he's almost prevented from doing that because the team picks itself now. Yes, there were changes at the weekend, but it is from a smaller pool. And actually, I think we could probably name 10 of the starting 11 when it comes to Wednesday night, couldn't we, Scott?
Yeah, we could, but don't forget what we're saying here is on one hand, Arsenal have been using the same amount of players too often, and yet for City, they're using the same amount of players.
Yeah, but he's rotated them a slightly different way, hasn't he?
Well-
And he's made sure. I mean, Diaz, for example, didn't play in the first half of the season, pretty much. Laporte's hardly played during the course of the first 6 months of the season. So when they've needed to come in, and Diaz has been a massive, massive asset to them in the second half of the season, then they're starting to put. I mean, Foden's been in and out of the team all season, hasn't he?
Yeah, but
Bruno hasn't played every game.
A lot of those have been injuries, haven't they? I mean, De Bruyne, yeah.
Some of them have been injuries, yeah.
Yeah,
Some of them have been rested as well.
So it's been forced upon him. But what I just think in terms of going back to Arsenal is that, and they've got to be careful. The negative is they might not have a better chance for a good few years, because I do believe the rest of the teams will get better. But mentally, when you haven't been in that position before, and now they have, they know what they need to do, and that's the difference here that City have. They've been there before, and providing everyone's fit. I mean, look, you say about we know everyone who's going to play. That's really Foden out the side. So how well has Jack Grealish done to sort of make himself as a starting 11 now? Look,
That's the job, right, though? If you're a £100 million player, you make yourself indispensable.
Well, I don't like talking about players and how much they've been bought for, because that's nothing to do with them. You can maybe compare the salaries they're on, because that's what they're asked for, and they got to justify that. But still, you're trying to get Mahrez and in front of Mahrez and Foden and Bernardo Silva and all those type of players as well. And Jack Grealish, to be fair to him, has done that. Look, he's been great. City have been great. But I was surprised, to be honest with you, Sam. And I'd be surprised if Pep was thinking about the Dixie Dean record, because I think it's not about personal records. I think Pep is so ruthless. It's about, we've got a chance of winning the treble here. And I was slightly surprised, although I will never doubt Pep Guardiola, because if he picked up an injury, Haaland, then there could have been a problem. There was 3 or 4 absolutely key players that need to be playing in that Real Madrid side, against that Real Madrid side in midweek. And Haaland was one of them. De Bruyne was another. Kyle Walker's another as well. And Edison's. I mean, you could name a few others. But look, he did it. I think if he'd have known what would have happened, if the Arsenal game was before the Brighton game, he would have made more changes. But he didn't know that. So they got the win. It was a great win. And how good is Ilkay Gundogan, by the way?
Well, I mean, what a goal. What an end to the season this player is having. I mean, he's out of contract in the summer. He looks a little bit like a slightly more live and athletic Alex Crook. Surely City will look to extend the contract. I mean, he has been linked with Barcelona quite heavily, actually. But speaking to the guys in and around Barcelona this week, I mean, their situation is so uncertain. They're not going to be able to make those big decisions about getting a free contract like Gundogan in on big wages until very late in the day. Is he going to wait around for that, or is he going to find somewhere else, or are Manchester City going to go for him? But he does look like a man going out in style at this moment in time, Crook.
Well, he always seems to come good in May. We had a text during commentary yesterday for talkSPORT International saying always captain Gundogan in May, because he comes up with some massive goals and massive performances. I think I'm told his camp are quite keen on the Barcelona project, but as you say, they've got all kinds of financial issues, especially if they're trying to facilitate Lionel Messi's return. I think Man City would be crazy not to try and keep him, because he's the heartbeat. You know, he wears the captain's armband, he scores goals, he can do that defensive role. He's a very intelligent footballer. He
did say to me, actually, when we were in Munich, that one of the problems might be the fact that his physical condition might not be able to stand up to the rigours of the Premier League. Again, it is sort of one of those things that it has taken its toll on him. He's in his early 30s now, but he was like puffing his cheeks out going, there's a lot of factors here, you know, we're talking, but you know, I don't know if my physical condition is going to be good enough to be able to play for Pep in this sort of situation going forward. And that's a bit of a concern, I suppose, for him. But ultimately, his talent outweighs that, doesn't it, Scott?
Sam, I've got a question for Crookie. Why has it been left so late that City haven't gone in this position and signed him? I mean, it tells me that City must want him. And even if he is getting a little bit on and feeling tired, well, I'm sorry, 20 games of Gundogan in your side can still help you win trophies. It must be that he wants the different lifestyle thing. Because, look, Barcelona winning the La Liga and that, and they're Barcelona, but they're a million miles away from what Manchester City are. But look, it's lifestyle. I had my stag week in Barcelona. I loved it. I loved the place. And who wouldn't want to live there? You know,
is that your job as a estate agent sort of audition going on there? Because Gundogan, don't worry, I can tell you where to go and live. I've been this place on my stag do. I've also been to Ibiza quite a lot. You could live there and commute to Mallorca.
It's definitely closer to Ibiza than Manchester.
I think you're right, though. I think what we know about Pep Guardiola and City as a club is they're quite accommodating, to players who've served them well when they want to move on. We saw that with Jesus and Zinchenko and Raheem Sterling last summer. So I think that there was certainly a stage a few weeks ago where Gundogan, hence his conversation with Sam, was leaning towards leaving. But who knows, if he can keep this going at the end of the season, maybe there might be a school for a rethink on his side.
Calvin Phillips got his customary 90 seconds. He led the Twitter vote for Manchester City Player of the Season, right? So the club actually had to move it off Twitter. They put the final three of Ake, De Bruyne and Haaland to a website vote because basically the vote was hijacked by Leeds United fans. So they thought, right, this is getting silly. Everyone was talking about it. We were getting loads of messages about it. In the end, they just were like, no, we need to move this away.
Producer Jeremy loved it as well, didn't he, Sam?
He did. He was voting. He voted 15,000 times, I think, for Calvin Phillips over the course of the last couple of weeks. We should talk about Everton because Calvert-Lewin came off with a groin tightness, let's say that. That's a real worry, isn't it? I mean, 45 minutes on the clock. He actually played quite well in the game. They looked all right for the first half an hour before they conceded those 2 goals in 90 seconds, which changed the course of the match. They didn't want to risk him, and I understand that because they've got big games to come, but they looked a completely different side without him.
I'm sceptical about the groin injury. They were 2-0 down. I think Sean Dyche knew they weren't going to get back into it, and we know that Dominic Calvert-Lewin is made of glass. I think they took the decision, look, let's just rest him so that he's fully refreshed for the final 2 games of the season.
Interesting, because I suggested that. I was doing a Sunday session yesterday with Mickey Gray, and when the news came through that Calvert-Lewin was being replaced at half-time, I said, is there any hope here that it is just a tactical decision? And Mickey blew his cheeks out and he was like, no way, this can't happen. You can't take him out of the team at this stage. And I thought, well, look, they're losing 2-0 to Manchester City. This is a team that don't score that many goals. I know they just pumped Brighton 5, but they ain't going to score 5 again. They ain't going to score 2 again, let alone the 3 that they would need to win the match. So actually, does it make more sense just to leave him on the sidelines and then use him for the games against Wolves and Bournemouth and hope that's enough to get over the line, Scott?
Do you know what, chaps? It's a really interesting point, isn't it? When I first heard, and I thought, like Mickey, no, there's no way that's tactical. He's one of your best players, and since he's come into the side, they have looked a different side. But they're up against Manchester City, the best team in the world. They're 2-0 down. Are you going to do anything? And as Crookie says, a guy who just has a massive history of injury problems. So I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if Sean just said, you know what, sit it out. We're going to lose this one. We need you in the last 2 games. Wolves away, Bournemouth at home.
I once spoke to a coach at Everton to sort of try and ascertain why he has so many injury problems. And they've been through everything with him. How he sleeps, what car he drives, what chair he sits in, what stretches he does before the game. They've analysed everything about him. And I think it's in the end, they've sort of come down on the side that it's genetics, it's load. His body is just hasn't got the ability at this stage to take the rigours of top-level Premier League football with the regularity that you need to be able to compete at the top level on a week-to-week basis. And that's why he's vulnerable to injury. It's nothing to do with diet, because he lives his life in exactly the right way. He approaches everything in the right way. He trains perfectly. He does what you're supposed to do as a Premier League footballer. But yet his body, I think, in the end, has just let him down, Scott.
Sam, I look at my career and I definitely went through, once I sort of left Charlton and went into the Premier League, struggled with injuries, in pretty much almost every season, bar the season I won the cup with Chelsea.
Did you win the FA Cup?
I've got the medal. Do you want to see?
Next time.
Yeah, it's just a medallion there. And it can't be a coincidence. And I look back now and I think to myself, I think I played about 200 odd games while I was at Charlton. I think I only played another 200 games in the 10 years that followed. So I struggled big time. Now, sports science and the diet wasn't quite there. And let's just say, I used to like a night out every now and again. And that was fun. So could I improve?
He's talking the past tense. Last week was a long way away.
Could I improved a bit in that? Then yes, but still, I still think my body struggled with the rigours of Premier League football. Now, Dominic Calvert-Lewin is 6'4" and he's built like he's built. I'd be 100% surprised if that's the case. I think he probably can tweak certain things. And I wonder whether mentally he's one of those players where if he gets something, he doesn't want to play if he's got a niggle. I don't know. But it could be that. But where we live in now with sports science, they've got to try and be the best they can be. But I completely empathise with that.
Roy Keane not holding back in his criticism of Jordan Pickford as a goalkeeper. Was that harsh? I thought he made one particularly good save in the game. I mean, I didn't like the sort of Arsene Wenger on the beach pose when he went down low to save Rodri's shot to his right-hand side. Looked a little bit as if he was like going to have a little wink and say, "Hi, girls, it's me, Jordan." That was a bit OTT. But the free kick, it wasn't his side, was it?
Well, I did say in commentary, I was doing the game with Trevor Steven, and it was fairly obvious that Gundogan was going to take the shot on. And I did say to him, could Pickford have done better? Because it didn't feel like the most ferocious free kick in the world. He almost sort of caressed it into that top corner. The second goal, it looks bad, but I think point blank range against Haaland, Pickford's gambled that he's going to go to his left. Obviously, he didn't. He went to the right, and Pickford ends up looking a bit foolish. But yeah, I would be a little bit critical about the free kick.
I was listening to Shay Given talk about it, and he sort of marked out the zones. This is the goalkeeper's zone on the left-hand side, and this is the wall zone. The wall didn't do its job. Mickey Gray thought that the wall had actually taken a step back during the build-up to it, as if like the referee had gone down, marked down the sort of 10 yards where the wall should be, and then for some reason they'd sort of adjusted themselves and stepped back an extra yard, and maybe that gave Gundogan the opportunity to get it up and over and into that corner. But the Haaland goal, I actually thought the marking was terrible for that.
Yeah.
Because they'd left Haaland free inside the penalty area. And, if you're waiting for Pickford to come out and try and deal with that, I mean, you've made a mistake in the first place, haven't you, in leaving Haaland free?
Well, absolutely. You got to get touch tight. You got to make sure, even if you're not going to win the header, that he doesn't win the header, and you sort of almost jump into him a little bit early, and they weren't anywhere near him. But what I would say about Gundogan, I mean, one thing, yes, I do think it was harsh what Roy Keane said about Pickford, but I do think Pickford is one of those who's a bit Marmite with his personality, isn't he? You want your keepers to be confident, but sometimes he can be like,
he's on the edge.
He's on the edge, and maybe there's certain people, shall we say, who perhaps don't have loads of patience, who are quite ready to have a go at someone when they seem to be making a mistake. But I just think the Gundogan thing, the first goal, just absolutely sensational. The second goal, that was a cross of someone who's got a wand of a left foot. He put it inch perfect. And then obviously the third goal with a free kick, and it's a good word that Crookie uses, he caressed it. He's still with the inside of his foot, pace and precision, and Pickford had no chance.
It'd be interesting to see what happens in terms of the relegation picture now, because they lost a couple of goals in the goal difference race that they racked up against Brighton. So things looked a little bit healthier for them. Now they've slipped back towards where Leeds are. There's only a point between them and Leeds at the top of the relegation zone. And if Leicester were to win on Monday night, then Everton would be back in the bottom three. And after that brilliant sort of vibe that came out of their trip to the seaside, all of a sudden they'll feel quite flat if Leicester end up jumping above them. In fact, Everton will be supporting Liverpool on Monday night, which is a weird thing for them to be doing. Brentford beat West Ham by 2-0. We'll just do this quickly. I mean, the big story here is about Ivan Toney. He didn't play in the game, and reports are that his ban could be decided too. I wonder if that'll have a big impact on any sort of move that he is prepared to make in the summer. I mean, West Ham made 9 changes for the game. I mean, I totally get it, because as far as they're concerned, they're mathematically safe. I mean, the maths would have to be Einstein-esque in order to sort of change the course of history and West Ham drop to the Championship. But it wasn't 100% certain, and it wasn't a great performance, actually. The big talking point from the game, I think, is the handball decision. When West Ham look as if they've got a goal back, and it's ruled out because Mbama touches it with his arm as it comes back off the post. The laws of the game say that the goal should only have been ruled out if there was a deliberate handball in the build-up to the goal. That was not deliberate handball. There's no way that can be deemed as deliberate handball. The officials got it wrong. Also, it would have to be in the immediate act before a goal is scored. And it wasn't, because it went back out of the 6-yard box and came back into Danny Ings. So the application of the law by the referee and the VAR was completely wrong in that situation. West Ham should have got a goal. I'm not saying it would have changed anything. It doesn't really matter, because West Ham are already safe, and Brentford, they were going to probably win the game anyway. But it's just crap. It's just utter crap. I mean, it's just terrible, terrible officiating. By the way, Howard Webb is going to be on White and Jordan between 10 and 1 on Tuesday morning to answer some of those questions about the VAR and its application and some of the decisions that have happened over the weekend. That's the best of Sunday's action. Now let's turn our attention to the battle at the bottom of the Premier League, starting with a chaotic game at Ellen Road. Leeds 2, Newcastle 2. This game summed up by a mental 90 seconds where Leeds could have gone 2-0 up and moved so far away from danger that they almost felt as if they were getting a ticket to safety. And then, literally in the blink of an eye, they found themselves at 1-1. I was there for this one, and it was absolutely crackers. And speaking to Sam Allardyce afterwards, he thought it was crackers too. The individual errors really cost Leeds United. Firpo, terrible. Bamford, the miss. Actually created the first goal and played well in general play, but actually in front of goal, he just looked just shot of confidence. And Verba, Big Sam spent all week telling them, don't dive in, stay on your feet, don't dive in, stay on your feet. Yet that seems, Scott Minto, to be their default mechanism. The fullbacks in particular, Firpo and Ayling, just can't stop diving in.
Yeah, and you've got to feel for Big Sam, haven't you? Because he's come in, he's wanting to try and do certain things. He knows his formula of getting something out of a game. And to be fair, it's a point, Sam, that beforehand, perhaps wouldn't have expected, or, a week or two ago, you're thinking, going to lose the next two games. It's the last two games where they'll define themselves. So to get a point is brilliant. But yeah, I mean, look, the big moment was Patrick Bamford's missed penalty. And I think all the Leeds fans, Jeremy included, was talking about Rodrigo and why is he not taking it? And he's
he should have taken it. Rodrigo shouldn't have taken it. He's the top scorer. He's got 100% record from the spot. Bamford's missed 4 of his 9 penalties taken. Why on earth is Rodrigo not pulling rank here and saying, fella, you're a nice bloke, but we need to score the penalty?
Yeah. And do you know what? Credit to Bamford for stepping up. Anybody who steps up to take a penalty...
No credit to Bamford for stepping up.
Sam,
no, because in that situation, it's too critical and he should have handed it over to someone who's better at it than him.
He believed that he was going to do it. And
he didn't believe. You could tell by the way he was standing on the edge of the penalty area.
You know him then. You've spoken to him. He didn't believe. He stepped up. He wanted the miss. He was wanting Newcastle. He had 2-2.
Don't twist it. Don't twist it. You're turning into Crook and Durham circa 2017. Look, the truth is that if you have... Look, listen, he's got ability. He's a very good player. He obviously is. I'm not one of these that turns around and says he's rubbish, he's this, he's that. And obviously we know he's been through a really tough time in terms of he's got online abuse, and that's been, I think, affected him. But I don't think in this circumstances, and it was an intelligent decision for that player who didn't look confident to me and I was 50 yards away, to take on the responsibility of a whole club in scoring a second goal at that point. If you really are that clever and intelligent and tactically aware, you need to know your limitations too, right, Crook? And ultimately, pass it over to someone who's got a 100% record, someone who's supremely confident, give them the ball and let them get the job done. Because actually, it's not about him, it's about Leeds United.
And maybe that sums up Patrick Bamford, because, I've got a little thing about him. I think he speaks too much. I didn't like the way that he tried to chuck Jesse Marsh under a bus after he was sacked. I think for somebody who's missed big chances, and that being another one, he just has too much to say for himself. And I think it's an issue for Patrick Bamford. I think it's an issue for Leeds that Junior Firpo is arguably the worst defender in the Premier League. I mean, what is going through his head? It's a good point on the face of it because it was so chaotic. But what will frustrate Sam Allardyce is they had the opportunity there to go and get so much more, and they just caused their own downfall and their own destruction.
Leeds weren't very good in the Newcastle weren't even very good in the game.
No, they weren't.
To be honest.
Can I finish?
Go on then.
Yeah, because you kind of interrupted.
We've only got 45 minutes, Scott.
And then you threw the question to Crookie, and then you're trying to move on. So, look, I'm not disagreeing what you're saying. He should not have taken the penalty. And actually, you can argue Big Sam. He should have taken authority over it and said no.
What are you going to say? He should have taken the penalty.
Well, maybe he should have done. But you can even argue the case where if he's lacking that much in confidence, what's he doing starting in the first place? So Big Sam's seen something in training. He obviously likes him. He obviously feels confident enough. I personally would not have had Patrick Bamford taking that penalty. I just want people to know to step up and take the penalty. In those situations, you need bottle. And whether he believed it or not, any penalty taker, and a few have said it to me, Guys Gimenieta, one of the best ever, Frank Lampard has said it to me, always nervous stepping up. It's not that they don't get nervous, but they feel the fear, they do it anyway. And Credit to him for stepping up, but I'm with you that he shouldn't have taken it.
I think you can. I think it's quite clear that you can have you could have the bottle to take a penalty, but also make the wrong decision in doing it. I think there's two different factors there. Is that I don't believe that he should have taken the penalty because he should have been intelligent enough at that point to go around and say, I'm not in the right position mentally to be able to do this, or even
you don't know
technically,
that,
actually,
Sam.
because
You
my
don't
record
know
isn't
that.
as great.
You don't know that. You don't know he wasn't in the right position. He should mentally. Be. You don't know he wasn't in the right position mentally. You don't know that.
Did he score?
Only it doesn't matter. People can be in the right position.
Did he just miss a chance from 5 yards 2 weeks ago?
Whether you score or not,
did he just delete his social media because he got too much abuse for it? I'm guessing the evidence is pointing to the fact that he wasn't 100% confident. Yeah, we're all guessing.
No one's 100% confident
in everybody's mind at every time, but we can all have an opinion on it. And from the outside, adding the evidence up, it didn't look like he was particularly confident.
Well, listen, there'll be lots of people in that position taking. Jamie Vardy missed a penalty recently, didn't he? James Maddison has missed a penalty as well. They probably weren't 100% confident, but they stepped up and they took it. Look, I think we're actually arguing over the same thing, that we agree that he shouldn't have taken it. My point is that, you know, you've got someone like Rodrigo, he should have done. Big Sam should have stepped up. You two are piling in on Bamford. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but at the same time, I respect anyone who does step up and take it in those pressure situations.
And so do I. I just wish he'd handed it over to somebody else, because I think Leeds had a massive opportunity to put themselves safe. I tell you another team that could get themselves safe in the not too distant future, because at Stamford Bridge at the weekend, Chelsea drew with, what team was it? Can't remember. Crookie, tell me, Crookie.
Well, they give points to everybody, so, you know, you're going to have to narrow it down for me a little bit.
Nottingham Forest got 2 goals at Chelsea to get themselves within an inch of safety. Within an inch. Massive result for Forest off the back of their win on Monday night. Taiwo won you, very impressive. Gave Thiago Silva a hard time. It just shows what he can achieve when he's fit. He was at Liverpool for a really long time. Didn't fit in, didn't get fit, went out on loan a couple of times, did very well at Union Berlin, then came back to the Premier League with Nottingham Forest. It didn't start particularly well, but it's certainly ending particularly well. And if they end up staying in the Premier League, his goals in particular, Crook, are going to help them fired towards safety.
Do you know what it reminds me of? And actually, we touched on this great escape on the podcast on Friday. Sunderland. Do you remember Connor Wickham from nowhere just started to score big goals at the end of that season? He's never scored a goal since, I don't think. But I would compare him to Awoniyi. I still think they need a point, Forest. You know, you look at Leeds against West Ham. West Ham probably will rest players again. I think they can win that game. I think Everton will pick up at least one more victory. Forest have got Arsenal at home at the weekend. Then they go to Palace away. Palace in red-hot form. So I think it's still in the balance for Forest.
So how many points have Forest got?
They're on 34, are they?
Right, okay. And what was it you said to me a couple of weeks ago? 34 would definitely be enough to stay in the Premier League. Now you're revising that.
I think I said 35, didn't I?
You said 34. You've been saying 34. You said it'd be lower than that. It'd be lower than that, because I keep giving you the average, that 35 is the average over a 10-year period. Oh, it'd be low that year. In fact, I think there's a tweet that you sent out saying that it was going to be a low total this year as well from about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I was thinking at the time, it's not. It never is. Because weird things happen at the end of the season, which is why you end up getting those odd results where it goes just a little bit above the line. I think maybe 35 will be enough, maybe. But, you know, that's not 100% sure either. But Nottingham Forest have given themselves a really good chance. And Steve Cooper's done a terrific job, Scott, hasn't he? When you think that he's taken them from bottom of the Championship, relegation fodder, just over 18 months, 19 months ago. And now all of a sudden they're going to stay in the Premier. Well, they've got a great chance of staying in the Premier League.
Yeah, and your prediction, you know, as much as it was going up and down,
I didn't want to mention it.
I'll mention it on your behalf, Sam.
September.
Yeah. Look, not just what he did last season, but the fact that, and a lot of players were leaving anyway, so a lot of players had to come in. But I think it was 23 players. And there were players who, again, I remember touching on it when I first sort of joined the podcast crew and saying, look, if I'm a left back and I'm coming in at the start of pre-season, then another left back comes in 2 weeks before the start of the season or before the deadline, and he's in front of me, I'm suddenly disgruntled. I'm like, why have I come here? So Steve Cooper's had to manage all that behind the scenes as well. Find his best team, keep the players who aren't playing as happy as possible, with a club that hasn't been in the Premier League for, I don't know, what was it, nearly two decades, that we're always going to be, if you finish 17th, that's a magnificent season. And look, the away form he's got to try and sort out. I think that's about quality as much as character. I think the home form shows that the home fans have helped them and get through so many situations. But you talk about getting towards the end of the season and strange results can happen. And obviously the strangest one is probably that Brighton 1, Everton 5. But look, Forest they've beaten Brighton, they've beaten Brentford, they've drawn against Chelsea. I actually think it's a great time to play Arsenal right now, who will be, so low at the moment. The title's gone. And yeah, going back to Steve, I think he's done a fantastic job. But you also have to give credit to the hierarchy and the owner, who does have a history.
Firing him.
Well, one for hiring him.
I actually think the chief executive who came in at the beginning of the season has done a very good job inserting himself in between Evangelos Marinakis and Steve Cooper. But also, you've got to give credit to Steve for managing upwards, Scott.
No, absolutely. But you can only, I'm sure he's great at managing upwards, but the owner and the chief exec has come in and he's obviously chipped away at the owner, but the owner has a history of sacking managers. And for him to keep the manager, and not just keep the manager, but to make a massive statement and give a long-term contract where, I wasn't sure if they were going to be still sack him if they were in this position. I think there was the fact there were so many clubs in this position and they still had a good chance of surviving. That was a reason to keep him. But you have to give credit to the owner, to the chief exec, to Steve Cooper, and well done, the lads. And I actually do think they will survive now.
Well, I hope so, because I won't let Crook forget it, despite the fact that he's been trying to jibe me for a good 6 months about it. Steve Cooper, do you want to just pay tribute to him, Crook?
Let's see at the end of the season.
Okay. As for Thiago Silva, big banner for him at the end of the game. In fact, at the ground before the game. He admitted he might not remain at the end of the season. I mean, they should definitely let him go. He's 38. He wrote a big love letter on Instagram as well, which suggested that was the last time that he will be at Stamford Bridge. And that's fair enough. He's been a good servant. He's won the Champions League. He's done his bit, but he's too old. And if you want to play, if you want to become a progressive team, you need to push up to the halfway line. And he doesn't want to do that anymore. It's simple as that. And under Pochettino, there is going to be no sort of quarter given or asked in terms of standard and decision made. So it's probably best, actually, isn't it, Scott?
Didn't his missus come out on Insta as well and say, well,
she said something about Fluminense, I think. I think she sort of indicated that Fluminense were interested. And he sort of said after the game, there's nothing sorted with that.
I read somewhere that she had said, we're staying in London. So,
did she?
Yeah. That's
know.
what I read.
Those competing fake Thiago Silva's missus accounts on social media. This is how bad social media is, right? This is not a joke.
It wasn't on Insta, by the way. I didn't see it on that. I just saw it in an article online.
Oh, right, okay. Well, listen, someone actually set up a Twitter account in my wife's name with a picture of my wife, and we had to write to Twitter and get them to take it down. And my missus had to send off the passport to say, no, that's really not me. This is me on this account, not that one.
Wow.
So someone just set it up under her name and was tweeting, pretending to be her. It was just, first of all, why would you do that? Why would you do that? And secondly, where did you get the information from? That's what I can't understand.
Crookie, why did you do it, mate?
I was going to say there are two Sam Matterfaces on Twitter as well, but one's called Sam Matterface, one's called Rylan Clark.
Hey, I thought I was good on Eurovision on Saturday night. Lampard restoring Mendy in goal. Why? Because he was culpable for the first goal again. I don't know what's going on there. Poch looks like he's coming in, and that should be sorted over the next week. But we have been telling you that over the course of the last few weeks here on the Game Day podcast. Southampton 0, Fulham 2. Oh, here we go. Southampton are heading down. Crooks, do you know what, Scott? It's been so funny this week because obviously, we just spent a lot of time with a lot of different clubs, talking to different people in and around the Premier League. But the way this boy has cozied up to Brighton and Bournemouth over the last few months has been nothing short of scandalous. Absolutely scandalous.
Do you know what as well?
Because he knows he's onto a bad thing with Southampton, so he needs to make sure his nest is feathered elsewhere.
Absolutely. He saw what was coming a long time ago. I was listening to talkSPORT on Saturday as well. He seemed to take great enjoyment when those goals went in.
He did.
Not
It's almost
at all.
like he's turned.
Not at all. I was painting the picture, but you know what? I did look. I was looking through social media last night, and there's an article clipping up what we've been saying on this podcast in August, and the headline was "Crook warns of disaster unless Southampton bring in experience." Now, if I saw it coming in August, and Sam, you did as well, how did the powers that be at St Mary's not realise that fielding a team of kids alongside James Ward-Prowse was not the recipe for Premier League survival? It's been a disaster.
Yeah, and I remember you and I having a phone conversation. We'd just been told the plan of action. I think it might have even been before the summer, because it was when Rasmus Ankersen and his new cohort had come in, and there was a bit of a power struggle going on behind the scenes, and we were sort of listening to that and being told that this is the plan that they're going to go with. And the first thing I said to you went, well, that's not a good idea. This is the Premier League. This is high standard. That's not going to work. And then, obviously, as the season's unfolded, we've continued to sort of suggest that that's the case. I do think that they probably wouldn't have gone down in as dramatic of circumstances if Ralph Hasenhüttl had just stayed in charge, but maybe that had run its course. But the decisions that they've made have just been nothing short of scandalous, really. I mean, they've bought bad players, they've bought inexperienced players, they've made poor managerial changes, and their strategy seems completely flawed. So ultimately, this has been a long time coming. And they released the worst PR statement to come out of a club that's just been relegated in history. Ridiculous. On Saturday night. But I'm not entirely sure. I'm convinced that they're that well equipped for promotion next season. Anybody else?
Well, they're going to get some money in because Ward-Prowse will be sold. Lavia, I think it's wishful thinking to expect him to stay. Salisu and Bella Kotchap will go. Walker Peters will fetch a few quid. And what you can't accuse the owners of is a lack of investment. They've just spent their money really badly. So I think financially they're well equipped. It's all about this managerial appointment. Jason Wilcox is coming in as director of football. I'm told that he is,
scouting and recruitment. That's important too.
Yeah. But just getting the right manager, someone with the authority, someone who the fans are going to take to. Russell Martin is a major contender, but already I'm seeing Southampton fans not happy with that. He only ever finishes mid-table in the Championship, but he plays the type of progressive, possession-based football that they want. I think he would be a good appointment. I think Southampton fans have to get real if they think someone like Graham Potter or Brendan Rodgers is going to take this job, because it just isn't going to happen.
Well, that's not going to happen. We probably should be a little bit careful about what we say about Southampton, Scott, bearing in mind that Crook and I also both suggested that Burnley might get double relegated, and then they came back with more goals than you can imagine and a brilliant performance. So, but they appointed the right manager who had great contacts and scouted very good players and came back bouncing. I mean, I suppose Southampton fans will be hoping that something like that happens to them.
You've absolutely hit the nail on the head, both of you there, really. I think, obviously recruiting is important, but the manager, I was sort of in my head about back-to-back relegations or certainly Burnley struggling. And yet what they did was a lot of players did go. They did recruit well, but they brought in a guy who, I'm pleased to see him staying at Burnley, but I think he will go to the top. You've got to be careful what you say nowadays because, we've seen managers who have been great names and it's not quite happened for them. But you just get the feeling from the people that I've spoken to as well, the way he conducts himself, the meetings he has, how he talks, the standards he sets are nothing short of sensational. So for Southampton, this is absolutely crucial. I think that in terms of, and again, as Cookie says, it's not about the owners not spending money. The money is there. They've got to get the right manager in place, recruitment. And I just don't, because it's not easy. People turn around and say, now look at Burnley. Oh, well, they've gone up, so we can go straight up. Doesn't happen like that.
Interesting to see Vincent Kompany, by the way, at the Emirates on Sunday. But not necessarily because he was watching Arsenal and Brighton. I can understand he's probably mates with Mikel Arteta from his time at Manchester City, and he just went and sat to watch the game because he knew it was going to be a high-level game and he wanted to take it in. But more worryingly for me was that he was sitting next to Roman Kemp, the guy off I'm a Celebrity and the guy who presents the breakfast show on Capital. Now, Roman's a nice guy, but how did he get that ticket? That's like the best ticket in town. Roman should be sitting there mining Vincent for all the possible knowledge he can get out of him. And when I saw the picture of the two of them, Roman was just watching the game, not talking to Vincent. I mean, I'd be honest with you, maybe he chewed his ear off for about 45 minutes and ultimately Vincent was like, I've had enough now. But I remember the first time I ever met Jose Mourinho in a social setting, Sam Allardyce, after about 20 minutes, pulled me to one side and went, "Could you just shut up?"
We've been telling you that for 20 years.
Do you know what?
It is amazing, though. You never know. If you get a posh ticket, as I found out against Barcelona, if you're Gareth Southgate and you think you're going along for a quiet evening just to take in a game, you don't know what imbecile could end up sat next to you, do you?
Oh, did you speak to Gareth? No, because you just spilt tea over him and stopped him from seeing the second goal, didn't you?
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, dear. Right, okay, let's round off the best of the rest of the weekend, starting with Spurs, whose chase of Julian Nagelsmann is over. Was it ever really on? And their hopes of European football are over too. Were they ever really on? Well, that's not entirely true, is it? Because despite Aston Villa beating them by 2-1, I mean, there is still a chance that Spurs could sneak in and win a Conference League place. But it's 7 away games without a win now for Spurs. Villa go above them in the table. I mean, the relegation picture is not sorted in any way, shape or form. But it's also very exciting at the top of the table where anyone can get into those European places. I mean, Liverpool, Brighton, Tottenham, Villa, all arguing over, 3 places in the Europa League and the Conference League. It's going to be quite exciting between now and the end of the season. I think it does definitely keep the season alive. But the big story around Tottenham is Nagelsmann, right? Ruling himself out of the managerial hunt. Because ultimately, Scott, Tottenham, very prestigious club, great supporters, always had a fantastic tradition of playing wonderful football, to Darius to do and all that. And Glenn Hoddle, the people that work there are brilliant. And I know a lot of them personally. I've got a lot of friends who work behind the scenes at Tottenham. And there is a little part of me that sometimes wants them to begrudgingly be happy. Nothing more than that, just happy. Because they're nice people. However, Tottenham were never, ever going to appoint Julian Nagelsmann as their manager. That was never going to happen. Why on earth would he, who's just been quite spuriously sacked by Bayern Munich, and no one can quite work out the real reason why, the man that's been chased by every top club in pretty much Europe over the course of the last couple of years, go to Tottenham, who haven't got a director of football. They don't spend anywhere near the sort of money that Chelsea, Manchester United, Manchester City spend, Real Madrid spend, and they don't win anything. Why would he go there? Why would that? But that was never going to happen, was it?
No, I don't think it was. In terms of Nagelsmann, it's interesting, isn't it? Because he was actually my number one choice for Chelsea. Because I see him as a really young, hungry manager who's been there at the top and perhaps knows what he wants. And would he change a few things? Well, quite possibly. And Spurs is a club. If it was a club on the up, if it was a club that was willing to spend a lot of money to get into, and the owners have come in and said, right, we're going to do this in the same way that Chelsea's owners did. I could understand that, because I think the project, you just said everything about Spurs with the stadium and the training ground and everything else on top is terrific, absolutely first class. But there's a big job to do there at Spurs. First of all, what's happening with Harry Kane, but even the rest of the team, there's not that many players. Certainly you wouldn't put towards title winning or even top 4 next season. So there's a big turnaround that needs to be done. And I just think Nagelsmann sees himself as up there, one of the very best managers around the world. So no, it was never going to happen.
Yeah. And that's the key thing, right? Whether or not he is or isn't going to be a revolutionary in the game of football, that's kind of irrelevant here. The fact is that he pitches himself at this level and Tottenham are at this level. And that's the difference. And I think he'll probably end up at Real Madrid in the summer. And when he does, it will look even more fanciful that Tottenham were never in the running for him. I mean, the idea that they turned around and said, "Oh, we weren't interested," is absolute nonsense, isn't it? That's like turning around and when you're a kid and you go up to the best looking girl in school and you go up to her and you say, "Do you fancy a date?" And she says, "What? I don't even know you are." And you go, "Well, I was never interested anyway. Didn't want one. Never."
It's a perfect analogy, and you know it's a slightly strange briefing. I mean, they'll have done it because obviously they're going to turn to somebody else now, and if it was public knowledge, as it pretty much was, that they were in for Nagelsmann, then whoever they bring in knows that they probably weren't their first choice, and the Tottenham fans are going to know they're not going to be their first choice as well. But where do they go from here? Because they never made any real advances to get Pochettino back. I know he was slightly surprised that call never came. Nagelsmann isn't going to happen now. Vincent Kompany, we know was on their shortlist, has committed his future to Burnley, so at least in the short term, he's not going to go there either. Where do they go from here? Brendan Rodgers is someone that Daniel Levy has admired for a long time, as is Graham Potter, the two that we mentioned as not going to Southampton. How much damage did Potter do to his reputation at Chelsea, and will Tottenham fans accept, on the face of it, a failed Chelsea manager? I think they're in disarray, Spurs. Absolute disarray.
50 days this has been going on. 50 days. 50 days. And they still haven't got a sporting director, and they haven't got a manager, and they haven't got a clue who they're going to appoint. And that's the problem. We can speculate all you like about who's going to be the new manager of Tottenham, but they don't know. And if they don't know, how we're not going to know. We're just guessing like everybody else at this moment in time. If I was to give them a 3-man shortlist, Scott, I'd be suggesting Ruben Amorim from Sporting, probably Brendan Rodgers because of his knowledge of the Premier League, and Thomas Frank at Tottenham, at Brentford, who I think they have thought about. I think he's on the list. I think he's someone that they've maybe just sort of tentatively made contact with. But I do think that they will sound out Graham Potter as well. And that would be a massive mistake. I don't think they'll appoint him for this reason. He's an ex-Chelsea manager. And they've appointed Antonio Conte. And they've appointed Glenn Hoddle. And they've appointed Andre Villas-Boas. And if they appoint another ex-Chelsea manager, the fans are going to go mad, right? So here's a bit of advice for Daniel Levy. Just for PR reasons, even if you think it's the right call, just don't do it. Yeah. Just don't do it. Because your PR ain't that great at the moment anyway.
You can throw in Jose Mourinho there as well. And all those managers were very successful. I mean, Glenn is God, with Spurs. So he is who he is. And everyone else incredibly successful with a great CV. Look, I think Graham Potter, if he hadn't have gone to Chelsea, could well have been the next Tottenham manager if he was still at Brighton, should we say. But no, absolutely.
Yeah.
After being
that would have been the better move for him, I think.
Well, being ex-Chelsea and the rivalry they've got and the fact that it didn't go well, I think that would be the worst case. Ruben Amorim is an interesting one. I know you're a big fan of his. I cover the Portuguese football. I think he's, disgruntled at the moment where they are and what's happened. And, with the players that went at the start of the season, which is where they are in the league. But he showed how good he can be in the Europa League. But I actually like Brendan. I do. And I think you can almost forget what happened to a point at Leicester because I think he was so disgruntled. He was just chugging along, really. He'd lost his mojo. You could tell he wasn't the Brendan. Something like Spurs would bring that back, that spark. And I think he'd do a very good job there. But, would the Spurs fans accept that? Because if we're saying Leicester's going down, you've got to massively put responsibility onto Brendan for that.
Well, we'll see what happens over the fullness of time. In fact, it might be quite a long time because Tottenham don't rush these things, do they? Let's be honest. Manchester United 2, Wolves 0. Top 4 chances looking a lot rosier after that win. Anthony Martial with a terrific goal. Quick sign and extension to his contract, Crook.
Terrific goal. Tapped into an empty net from 6 yards out. It was a good move. I'm not sure we're going to give Martial too much credit. I much prefer Garnacho's goal, to be honest.
It was a good goal. It was a good goal. It wasn't necessarily his role in it that was good. It was just a good goal. You're right about Garnacho. What a terrific take that was. And he's a bit of a one, isn't he? We mentioned him before a couple of times and that he is a proper character. He's only 18 years of age. He fancies himself something rotten, doesn't he?
And I don't mind that. And listen... I think he's going to be the future of the football club. I think Ten Hag at the moment is managing him in the right way. And I want to give Anthony a bit of credit as well because I think he played well. I think he's been given unfair stick, not least from our own Gabby Agbonlahor. I don't think his first season in England has been that bad. The numbers are okay. No. And I think he will get better.
The good news for Manchester United as well is that they've got Amad Diallo warming up nicely in the Championship with Sunderland. And anyone who saw the playoff game on Sunday night saw him play terrifically. Yeah, he got booked for diving, but he curled in a brilliant free kick. Absolutely sensational. It wasn't really a free kick because the free kick had actually been taken and rolled to him, and then he burned it into the top corner. I mean, that's a terrific asset to have, just bubbling along under the surface, Scott.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to go back to Garnacho because, blonde hair, tattoos, young kid. If you had that talent on the football field, Sam, I could have seen you doing that. Obviously, you've got
definitely bust.
You've got that talent in the broadcasting, but if you had that on the field, I could have seen you as a young kid coming through, all tattooed.
That was definitely my look. I did have that dyed blonde hair when I was about
there you go,
maybe a little bit older than that. Yeah,
there you
that
go.
Was definitely me.
Do it again now.
I might have to. Right, okay. Monday night, Leicester against Liverpool is live from the Premier League on talkSPORT. If that's gone when you're listening to this podcast, don't worry, because Inter Milan, AC Milan is on talkSPORT 2 on Tuesday night whilst we do the playoffs on talkSPORT. Wednesday night, Manchester City, Real Madrid. Thursday night, Newcastle, Brighton. What a big game that's going to be on Thursday. We'll be at St James's Park for that one. RZ against West Ham, the second leg is on talkSPORT 2 at the same time. Come on, West Ham. Look, let's be honest. Let's lay our cards on the table. I want West Ham to get to a European final. I want them to win a European final. I'm desperate for West Ham to have a little bit of success. I think David Moyes deserves it, but also I'm going to Prague. We'll see you later on.